Awaken Hardest Podcast with John White.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Awaken Hardest Podcast. I am the Awaken Hardest, John White. I want to throw a few things out before I begin the topic of the podcast today. If you follow me on Instagram, you would know that I am working on changing the podcast over eventually to a more of a grief conversation. So having guests on the podcast that have had significant losses and just having a conversation about that. I've had people here recently reach out to me and in the past as well about being on the podcast and talking about their losses. And I think that would take the podcast to the next level, whatever that means. But it's, I guess what I originally wanted to kind of get into is having conversations and discussions about grief. So I still have a lot of things to work out. This whole thing has been a learning process for me from the beginning. It's been almost a year now, I believe, since the very first episode was released, and we're at episode 21 now. So I'm going to begin the topic with a little preface. I want to throw some ideas at you, and this is about to get deep real quick. I want to throw the idea out there that the meaning of life is relationships. Follow me on this. I think that I've thought about this numerous times, thinking about my belief system and how much relationships play into that, how important relationships in my life are. And it really turns out that it seems to be relationships are kind of the beginning and the end. When we are born with a bond to our mother and then eventually our father. The relationship we have with our parents could arguably be the most important because they are the ones that help mold us to who we become in life. They have a lot to do with who we are. And from there, we form relationships with others, our siblings, our extended family, our friends, our pets, our plants, objects. Now think about the happiest moments and the worst moments in your life. Was the worst moment having to do with loneliness, the end of a relationship, the death of someone? Was the best moments? Were they meeting a partner? You're having your first child, having any of your children, or just a time with a friend. Maybe even, in all honesty, a vacation that you took by yourself and your relationship with yourself becoming better. My ultimate happiness is love. Being in love, being loved, my love for my kids, family, friends, etc. Or at least my biggest fear is losing them or being alone without them. It's funny because if you look at least for me, the one thing that feels the best is love. And like the worst thing you could do to a human is completely isolate them. Think about it. Like if somebody goes to prison, obviously they could have a death sentence and be put to death. But I think the worst situation would to actually just have to continue to live entirely in solitude. When they put people in solitary confinement, that has to be the most maddening, worst situation. I mean, you don't even you're in complete darkness, and like a claustrophobic feeling. You don't have any sunlight. You don't get to interact with nature. Again, all relationships that we have, relationships with the earth, with family, friends, being isolated from all of that and having that all taken away is the worst. So when I talk about relationships being the meaning of life or the possibility of, I just want to speak of the importance of relationships, because that has a lot to do with this idea of grief in relationships. Why the loss of someone can be so painful is it ends up becoming a hole, and it's a hole that will never be felt or filled in this lifetime. And it's hard because, the older we get, the more of those holes we have, and the more grief that the more we become familiar with grief in different ways, whether it be the loss of a really close family member, a friend. Pets are some of the hardest to grieve because they are absolutely a family member. That relationship, that bond is built over time. And when we talk about relationships, we're talking about an exchange of energy, a sharing of energy. I think that we literally connect with each other. The stronger relationship becomes, the more we are connected with that person. I think that overall we are all one. We come from the same creator, whatever that may be. But it turns out that everything that I've ever studied and looked at, it always comes back to being connected to the earth, being out in nature, connecting with nature, and the idea of grounding. And then we talk about love and marriage and having a family and going on vacation and sharing all these special moments. All of these things are an exchange of energy over time, the good, the bad. And, people in the spiritual community will talk about cord cutting and having energetic cords attached. I'm myself am personally a believer in that we attach our energy to each other, which may make it hard. It makes it hard when we end relationships, friendships, when we have the decision to, or one person has the decision to end a relationship. There's a grieving that goes on there, and I will absolutely have an episode about that, because some of my biggest grief is from relationships that I've been in, whether they ended by my choice or the other person's. The energy and that feeling that person gives you when they're not there anymore and they're not a part of your life. And I'm not talking about death. I'm just talking about them being in your life anymore. To be with somebody for 2 years and you share a bond with them, and that bond is love. It may be or may not. And there's a lot of other energies that are exchanged in different moments. The laughing, the crying, the vulnerability, opening up, about personal things, and having also healing with that person, healing other wounds while with that person. All these things create an energetic connection with that person. And then when that relationship comes to an end and you never speak to that person again or ever see them, it is, I can tell you from my experience, it is absolutely almost as equally as painful as somebody dying. And as a human being, we all, because of that specific situation, losing somebody through the end of a relationship, I think a lot of us have fear of being hurt, and that fear may turn into fear of starting new relationships. We also, people that have lost people to death, I know this was something for me early on. Because there were so many deaths early on, I was afraid to open myself up. The way that my mom had experienced all of this very close loss to her, which in turn was my extended family as well, but I seen how much pain she went through, and also adding that to the pain that I had, it made me want to shut down. And I built all these walls that I speak of. I'm the awakened artist because I have awoken that part of myself that I had hid away for a long time in defense of starting new relationships that could eventually end in pain and hurt for me. Now I'm in a place where I am doing everything I can to be more vulnerable and open up, but with vulnerability needs to come boundaries, something I'm learning as well. But all of this goes back to my relationships. The importance overall of our relationships in life make it absolutely difficult to lose someone. But if we don't have relationships that are filled with joy and happiness, then what's the point? What is there to look forward to? Where's the hope? Losing my parents recently, having my kids was the most important thing to me in the beginning of that healing process. I still had them. And at the time I had a partner when my dad passed, and I was very lucky to have her. I didn't have anybody when my mom passed, but having those relationships helped me to get through the ones that I lost, the people that I've lost. So it's kind of like I don't want to say it's a fucked situation, but in a way it is a little bit, but there's so much benefit and so much more. Let me say this. I have so many more happy memories and fun things I've done in my life than painful. And that's because of my relationships and the people around me that help bring me up during my low times. And I'm grateful for them and the fact that I created those relationships. Speaking of being grateful and having gratitude, I guess they're not exactly the same thing. But speaking on gratitude, one of the biggest lessons I'm learning, and I think that a lot of people out there are learning, it seems to be kind of a trendy thing I hate to say it's trendy because it's important, especially in this day and age, is living in the moment, being present. So much anxiety is out there, and anxiety comes from living in the past and living in the future and not living in the moment and slowing down. And when you are able to slow down in order to kind of keep yourself present, you have to remind yourself of the things you're grateful for or your things that you have gratitude towards. And those things, for me primarily, they're not objects. I'm happy that I do have gratitude for having a home and a vehicle and a job and a career and all those things for sure. But the first thing my mind goes to is my children, my family, my friends, and my relationships, the people that I still have with me, my pets, that's what I'm grateful for. And without them, I don't know how I would be present, because I wouldn't want to be present. I would want to be in the past all the time or in the future trying to create new relationships. And that just brings tons of anxiety because they're all just forecasting. And that is not a safe place to be in your mind. So, gratitude and being present, for me personally, has a lot to do with my relationships. If I didn't have those relationships, I wouldn't be able to be in the state of gratitude that I am, because my greatest joys come from those relationships. I am also a very introverted person, And I can tell you from my own personal experience that growing up in a household, 2-bedroom apartment, 5 kids, single parent, things were crowded, and I could not wait till I had my own privacy and my own place. And when I finally got that, I just absolutely loved it. And then eventually, at the end of my 20s, I have a family and children, and I'm sharing space again. Then I get to this point where their mother and I, we separate, and then the boys are not here all the time. And I'm also in this place of really trying to figure out who I am or was. And I separated for myself from everybody. I cut myself off from all my friends, family, and became very isolated. I was a hermit. And I seen what the negative effects of that were. There's a lot of benefits in understanding when I need my time to myself and how beneficial that can be. But more than anything, the isolation was not healthy for me. And I'm a very introverted person. Like I said, I like to be by myself. I love to sit and just be introspective and enjoy space to myself. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of my, I guess, sensitivities that I have to the 5 senses and energy and all of that. But regardless, I still need to have social interactions. And I become depleted very fast sometimes when I do. But it is definitely healthy for me, and it's a part of my life no matter how closed off and introverted I want to be. So keep that in mind coming from someone who very much likes his personal space, introspection, all of that, and just not sharing energy with anybody else, for crying out loud. I just really enjoy being able to have full control over my own energy in my space. But it's very important to interact with others socially. There's a balancing there, and you just got to find that for yourself. But again, another importance of relationships in life. No matter if you are introverted or extroverted, there's always a balance. And referring back to the healing process of grief and the importance of relationships, I know numerous times through my losses, it was so important losing my mom and dad. So important to have my siblings around more than anything because of the connection we shared with the people that we lost. And that goes the same for losing friends. When I've lost friends, being around my friends that share that connection with that person has been vitally important to my healing. But also having done the introspection or the diving into yourself and knowing who you are, sometimes we just need to be by ourselves. And that for me is a large part of my grieving. There's times where I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to share anything with anybody. I don't want to talk about it. I just need to feel it. And that's also important. So be kind to yourself and understanding what it is that you need. Don't feel the pressures of others telling you they think that you need to be around people more, whatever it is. Go through your process and what's best for you to be able to heal however you need to heal. And that's different for all of us. That pretty much wraps up this episode. I do want to say thank you for those of you who do reach out through social media and let me know how my podcasts affect you and the commonalities we have with each other through our losses is important. It makes me not feel alone in my own grief. And gaining those connections with others is a big part of my healing. And I thank you for that. And please, again, continue to reach out with thoughts if you also would like to be someone who would like to be vulnerable and be a guest and share your story with everyone, eventually when I change the podcast over to it being a more of a conversation, it won't be all dark. It doesn't have to be very sad. We can have a little bit of fun with it and honor the person that you lost through the podcast. If you are one of those people, please reach out and let me know. Share your story with me, and I will definitely get back to you. This is going to be something that is going to take a little bit of time for me because I have to get used to trying to figure this out and how to go about doing it, how to interact with somebody. I'm used to just talking to myself during these podcasts, so it's going to be a little bit of a different transition. And I don't think it will be that big of a deal, but I know there's some things I have to still work out as far as equipment goes and logistics of all of it and how I want it to go. I'm a bit of a perfectionist in some areas, and I want it to be healthy and help other people. So I have a good idea on how I want to go about doing it. It's just a matter of getting from point A to point B and doing that. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate all of you, and talk to you on the next episode. Bye. If you'd like to learn more about me and my experiences, follow @AwakenHardest on Instagram or visit the website awakenhardest.com.